welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to panel 3. And if you will allow me, I am double recording because we have the honor and the privilege of AOC Community Media being here taping us visually in a video form. And then I thought I'd also record us for the AOC Community Media online radio and make a little plug for all of us for Cypress Street Radio. And you can remember that it's Cypress Street Radio because we are located in Rosa Parks Transportation Center on Cypress Street. So one of the ways that you'll be able, when you go home, to review this information is to go to the AOC website and click on the social media link to YouTube, or you can just go straight to YouTube and look up AOC and search for the name of this event, Smart Changes, or AOC Smart Changes. So we're going to also, what I have been taping and asking you all a few questions, that will be on Cypress Street Online Radio, which you can find, again, clicking through the AOCinc.org website, or you can use an app for radio or for Shoutcast. So I wanted to let you know, and again, my name is Barbara Connor, and I have the privilege of being the moderator for this third and final unit, that Lafayette is particularly positioned to being not only a chic place and a musical place, but an interrelated, innovative, and technological place, such that, among other things, people off-site can take advantage of what we are doing here. And as you know, through LUS Fiber, our internet connections are as fast as you find in Silicon Valley. So welcome to Lafayette, and welcome to panel 3, and let me give you a quick introduction to our speakers. We're going to have, and I'll go ahead and talk about both of them at the same time if you'll allow me. Melinda Taylor is the director of the Lafayette Habitat for Humanity, and I hope you're familiar with Habitat for Humanity, a nonprofit ecumenical Christian housing ministry that works to develop communities for people in need by building and renovating homes and creating home ownership opportunities. They have partnered with the University Architecture Department, and they are building a 13-home pocket neighborhood to revitalize the historic Macomb-Vise area with at least one home incorporating solar panels and multiple porches in a student design. Our other presenter comes to us from the university. This is Professor Corey Staff from the School of Architecture and Design. He is a licensed architect and an LEED-AP. He is the developer of the first passive house, and I assume that refers to passive solar as opposed to a house that just lies around. Oh, I guess he's going to tell us. Okay. And it is a passive house in the hot, humid American South, and the first Louisiana LEED platinum home outside of New Orleans. And that platinum was expensive too. Now, I had the privilege of about 10 years ago serving on the Planning and Zoning Commission, where we talked about implementing the future plans for Lafayette and the comprehensive plan. And today we have Plan Lafayette, which is here as a full partner along with our utilities, municipal utilities, LUS Utilities, and also the League of Women Voters of Lafayette in this tripartite presentation on making energy available. And we're going to have Ms. Melinda come forward with us, and let's see, Taylor, how about that? Taylor, thank you very much.
My maiden name was Schmiedeberg, so Taylor is definitely much easier. And I need to get my presentation up here. Yep, there we go. as Barbara mentioned, I work with Lafayette Habitat for Humanity, and we work with folks who would not be able to qualify for conventional home financing, but who have enough regular, reliable income to be the operators of a house, who actually have the capacity to become homeowners, and we work with them to build simple, affordable, sustainable homes, and then sell the homes to the families at zero interest through mortgages that we actually hold. So we finance the house and serve as both a contractor and the lender for our homes. And today I'm going to talk specifically about what we do in the design and building process that makes our homes energy efficient and affordable and sustainable for families who are on a budget. Before I start though, just let me ask of the audience who's here today, is anybody thinking about building a new home here? No, okay, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about new construction, but I'd like to situate my comments, and I think Corey's too, in a larger context, which is, as Barbara mentioned, Plan Lafayette, which has really privileged as one pillar of the plan, revitalize neighborhoods. And I want to give you all kudos for actually not thinking about building a new home, because there are a lot of existing homes here that need attention and revitalization. And I think what Mike has done with his house is an example of what should be done in a lot of neighborhoods in Lafayette, and that's not build new, rebuild, and revitalize. But since we are building new homes, we're working in a neighborhood that has a lot of vacant property. And in the core neighborhoods of Lafayette, there are a lot of vacant properties that could be redeveloped. So our focus and our passion really is to go into those neighborhoods and help the residents who are there, not as the leader coming in and telling them this is what we're going to do, but as a partner coming in and saying, we're going to work with you, and we want to know what you want for your neighborhood, and we're going to be responsive to that and work in partnership with you to build new homes that will enhance the old ones and to help other people who are struggling to maintain a house that maybe has a building envelope that needs a lot of work. We're going to help them try to get their houses into a condition where they can better maintain them and where they'll be affordable in the long run. So what I want to do is just go through a few of our recent projects so you can get an idea of what we build and the keys to sustainability and energy efficiency for us. And as Gretchen mentioned, the Beausoleil house, having been built several years ago, that project was really a catalyst for a lot of things that happened in this community in the design and the sustainability arena. And one of those things that happened was a lot of spillover into Habitat's work. In fact, I'm just going to show you this house and go back to the previous slide, but this is the first home on which we actually partnered with the architecture program at UL Lafayette. It's a home that was built on a lot owned by a woman who had lost her previous home in a fire. And the house actually incorporates salvaged items from the home that she lost. It's on Carver Street here in Lafayette in the Truman neighborhood. And it's built using a lot of the technologies in a slightly more affordable form that were used in the Beausoleil house. We didn't use structural insulated panels like we did, but this home actually has spray foam insulation throughout, so it's a very tight building envelope. It's about 900 square feet. The woman who lives in it is a really very economical operator of the home, so her energy bills are phenomenally low. She keeps her air conditioning set at 80, and the house is all electric, and her bills, I think, consistently run well below $60 a month for the electrical for the house. So this partnership involved architecture students who spent time one semester designing the house in partnership with us and with the homeowner, figuring out what her needs were. And as a single individual, and this is one of Habitat's sustainable strategies, we build for the household that we're working with. So the house is sized for the people who are going to occupy it. And really, the main point that I want to make before I turn this over to Corey, because Corey really has some interesting things to say, is that what we do is small. We focus on building for the people who are going to live in the house and not having extra square footage. And the biggest thing that you can do If you're building a new home, I think in the realm of sustainability, or at least certainly one of them, is to minimize your footprint, make the house as small as it can be to still accommodate your needs. I mean, a lot of us probably live in existing homes, I know I do, that are considerably larger than what we actually may need. And in fact, my house is about 1,800 square feet. It's a 70s style brick ranch home. It's got a 4-kilowatt solar system on it. So it actually is fairly inexpensive to operate, and I've done some things with insulation as well. But you know, those kinds of things are things I really would like people listening to this to think about and take away. You know, how can you make your existing home more efficient, and how can, if you are building something new, how can you minimize its impact on the energy sources here, but also maximize its impact on the community by thinking about where you build. You know, are you going to go out and build in a brand new subdivision that's taking green fields and is going to actually take away agricultural land maybe and make a subdivision, or are you going to reinvest in this community in lots and neighborhoods where there's vacant property, where there's a real need for reinvestment? And I think there's a lot of that going on right now, and Habitat is part of that. Our hard cost to build a house like this, this is actually a 3-bedroom home in the Macomb-Vise neighborhood where we're focused, and we're doing infill development on vacant lots as well as this small subdivision that we're about to start breaking ground on. But this house is about 1,200-ish square feet. It's a little bit smaller than that. Is built to NAHB green standards. We don't certify right now, but we reference all of those energy standards in our designs. And we've been very fortunate to be able to work with some excellent architects and designers in this area. And this particular house was designed by Bennett Sabache. I am about to show you a house that was designed by Professor Jeff Jertson, who was the coordinator for the Beausoleil project, the faculty leader for that project at UL. But we also, in addition to the energy efficiency standards that we seek to adhere to, we also seek to make the houses livable long term. And I don't think anybody's really talked about ADA standards here, but the Americans for Disabilities, their Americans for Disabilities Act, I can't remember now what the acronym should stand for, but the ADA basically has some guidelines that give you some things to reference when you're looking at long-term sustainability for a house. So if you're going to age in place, if you're going to stay there, you want to think about some things that you may not be considering when you first build a house. But for us, it means making the houses visitable for anybody who is mobility impaired in a wheelchair. This house would require a ramp because it's on a raised foundation, but we're now building on elevated slabs, and the houses would easily be visitable, and they're also accessible inside. So the entryways and the kitchen areas, the bathroom, all of them are accessible. At least one bathroom is accessible to somebody who would be potentially wheelchair bound. So thinking about things like that is important. And then ease of maintenance and sustainability, and bringing the outdoors in. And that's something we really learned from the Beausoleil house and took to heart. And some of the houses that we were building, the previous models, really were more focused on building a structure on a lot that somebody could live in, and less about referring to the outside. And the outside is a really important living space to incorporate, especially in a small house. So Beausoleil taught us to look more towards bringing the outside in. So the houses that we're building now, all of them have enhanced porches, both front and back, and incorporate storage into the actual home itself instead of a freestanding shed, so everything is all under one roof. And I'm just going to wind up by showing you this house. The yellow house here was the first home that we built in Macomb-Vise, and it was designed by Jeff Jertson, and it referenced the best designs of the homes in that neighborhood, which actually are craftsman-style bungalows. And he took that craftsman reference and made the outside of the house look like that, but the inside is super energy efficient and very efficiently laid out in a small footprint. Has a really nice front porch, and frequently you'll see the family sitting out there if you drive past it. Johnny Ogeron with LCG designed this house, a really great porch, and again elevated, and everything is insulated underneath with spray foam as well as the envelope of the house. This house also, lovely picture of the foundation there, was designed by Jeff, and there's some of the front elevations and the porch that you can see. That's the interior. One thing you can do in a small house to maximize the feeling of spaciousness is to add to interior volume, and that's what we've done with this particular home. So feels a lot bigger than it is. About a little under 1,000 square feet. That house is a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, and it's about, I think, 950 square feet minus the porches. And then finally, this was our last partnership with the School of Architecture and Design in the home building arena. And this house was built for a very large family, and again, a very small footprint. This is a homeowner with 6 children, and it's a 4-bedroom house, but it's about 1,250-ish square feet. So, and everybody who lives there says it feels much bigger than that. So, you know, basically that's what we do. And one more thing before I turn it over to Corey, the ultimate in energy efficiency is using what's already there. So we have, in addition to everything else we do, we have a resale store at the Restore. And I'm going to put a shameless plug in for the Restore, because those of you who are homeowners could benefit by using what we have there, which is a lot of materials that have been saved from the waste stream by being donated to us, and we resell them for a fraction of the original cost. And those materials provide a source of home improvements for low-income homeowners and people who have rental property, and all of those proceeds go back into our program. But you know, consider building or renovating in an existing neighborhood. I would strongly encourage anybody who's thinking about building new to do that. Look for ways to use recycled material. Keep it out of the waste stream. Finally, donate it to the Restore. If you're renovating, if you have a home project that you're doing, we'll take your gently used or new items and we'll resell them. And it's all benefiting our program and the community at large. So thanks for your attention.
Okay, thank you for having me here. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate the work that the League of Women Voters do. This is just one of the many things with their issues with education, with voting, and their initiative with housing is deeply important to the community, and I'm glad you guys are all out here and that this word is getting out where it needs to. Thank you. And same goes for Habitat for Humanity. Do fantastic work throughout the community, and really stepping up for that. So this is I'm going to hit a few points here and try and keep it at a pretty quick pace and try and pepper a few examples of recent projects I've had with some illustrative points, ideas about how to build. So who I am, I'll get into key principles to save energy by, a few example projects with a few more principles, and then a brief comment about housing in Lafayette. I teach at the School of Architecture and Design. I've been there for about 12 years. I teach design studios at the undergraduate level as well as graduate level, and I teach some graduate seminars on high performance building, which some of these ideas will come from. I also have my own practice. It's a very small practice. Often just have one project going at a time. It's a side thing, and all these projects you see will have come out of that. So they're all either privately funded or with clients. These are the 4 projects I'm going to talk about. LeBois House is the passive house that was referenced earlier. And passive house actually is a German standard, energy efficiency standard that tries to reduce energy consumption by 90%. And there's a few basic kind of builderly attitudes that really underlie that. And I'm going to use that to structure how I present this work. The Dupuis House is in Maurice. And that's, they inherited farmland and they continued the farming there, and they made this house, which followed some of those principles. Darby Hackett House, which is in the St. Streets, under construction right now, had Uptown Lofts, which many of you may know, down by the main public library downtown. So to start with the key principles. The first one is, I think, a basic question of building in this area. We're in the South, the hot, humid South. Humidity makes it a really unique condition to build in. It makes it an extra difficult condition to design energy efficiently. And that's because the humidity, which we always complain about to people, is literally a load on a house. So to make yourself comfortable inside the house, you've got to reduce the amount of moisture so that you're comfortable, as well as reduce the temperature so that you're comfortable. Historically, there's been what I refer to as open and breezy kind of construction. Old style houses traveling through New Orleans, and anything that basically predates air conditioning would be a leaky building, because there was no way to manage that other than shading and ventilation. And those are really the only two passive strategies you have in this area. And so once we got air conditioning, it became a real conflict about what to do here, because most of the older construction, which was raised up, deep porches, lots of shading, managed it as best they could. They'd have high ceilings inside, hot air would rise, you'd get more comfortable. You'd have old style windows that were really tall. You could open them on the top and bottom, double hung, if not triple hung, so that you could have air coming in on one side, going out on the other side. And that worked fantastically. That vernacular tradition established a real baseline about what made common sense when you're building efficiently. Once air conditioning comes along, we kind of went whole hog onto that. And once you could plug that in, everything changed. The leakiness, the open and breeziness was the detriment. So if you had a leaky house and you plugged an air conditioner in, you were air conditioning the whole world. And so what do? Do you abandon those old ways and adopt the air conditioning? Well, clearly that didn't work out well. We spent about 50 years doing that, and the ranch house is one of those examples. And they are horrible in terms of their energy efficiency. You can get comfortable and you can maintain it through a kind of an exertion of control, but it leaves us with lots there. So the alternative is this kind of tight and sealed strategy. And at first that often turns people off because they think, well, I can't get any fresh air, sick building syndrome, there's no opportunity for ventilation. And those things are all true and they have to be managed. This in no way means not to have operable windows. You should always have the ability to open up your house, have ventilation travel through it. But the truth is the advances we have in building systems, particularly spray foam insulation, whether you want it or not, you have a tight house. And so you have to manage issues like sick building syndrome and fresh air coming inside, whether you're purposely designing something to be super energy efficient or not. And so, it's a compromise between these two things. You should obviously insulate well. This is spray foam insulation, and you can see how the reason it is so effective is because it makes the house tight. In addition to the spray foam insulation, or any way that you insulate, the construction, the contractor actually putting the wood together needs to pay a lot of attention to some key details down at the base where the soffit is, the ridge line. These places where wood comes together with wood and it makes, well, I'll talk about in a second, thermal breaks, but also real opportunities for leakage. You want to, one of the most effective things you can do is make a really tight house if you're going to air condition. If you're going to plug in and spend the effort to run electricity in there, you want a well-sealed house. And you can get that by insulation. So this is, reduced thermal breaks is another key part here. And this kind of goes to the construction. And if you look at this, all those yellow lines, more heat loss as you travel down, and the blue is less heat loss. But most heat loss, so this is actually from a warm climate, that's why it says like that. So the windows, you get lots of loss there. Windows are often described as just one step above a hole in the wall. And if you have a single pane window, you might not even be getting R1, which is basically a hole in the wall, right? And so when you get double panes, you go up to maybe an R2 and R3. If you get double pane with a film in the center, close to triple pane, you're lucky if you get up to R5. And so if you have walls that are being recommended at R19, roofs that are recommended at R30, R40, and you're getting high performance windows and they're only R5, it's a real limiting factor. I mean, windows are a difficult thing to manage. You want as much as you can to have that connection, to have the views, to be able to open them up, but you also have to manage it. But the other thing that does this, these are studs. And so everywhere that there's no insulation is a place where you don't have the energy efficiency. And so if you can figure out a way to build with less wood and more insulation, you're better off. And I'm going to show you some examples of something called optimum value engineering or advanced framing, where instead of 16 inches on center with 2x4s, you use 2x6s and do it 24 inches on center. And it dramatically reduces the wood, the thermal breaks, and increases the insulation. So build tight, insulate well, reduce thermal breaks, invest in windows and doors for those reasons I just said. I just made some quotes about the U value, and that is in the north, that's a much bigger deal. It's important down here, but equally, if not more important, is what they call the solar heat gain coefficient, which is how much the coefficient with which it manages the heat gain. And so when you look at windows, that's the number you want to look at, and that ranges usually between 0.2 and 0.8. And you can get down in the 0.2s, 0.27, 0.28, even 0.3, you're doing pretty good. And they're available here. Oops. And then the last one is the mechanical system. And once you do these previous ones, particularly building tight, you have to really worry about the mechanical system. And anybody who is by default doing spray foam insulation should really be thinking about this, because you don't have any air leaking in. You have a very tight house, so it's efficient. So you should often have a mechanical system to ventilate your house. And that's an extra piece of equipment, but it gives you a real advantage when you separate heating and cooling from ventilation. Because we often need ventilation when we don't need heating and cooling, and we often need dehumidification at a time when we don't need heating and cooling. And if your air conditioner is doing all those jobs, you have no power to use the part when you want to, and so you're wasting a lot of energy running a big mechanical system when you might only need a third of its activity. And so that ability to control it can get much smaller. When you separate those things out, you can shrink it down in size and save considerable both in the equipment and the running of the equipment. So those are the 5 principles. That's the kind of takeaway from this. I'm going to show some examples of projects as we go through. This is the LeBois House. It's right off campus. This was built back in 2009, 2010. It's very small. You can kind of see a sliver in there. It's actually 16 feet wide, and it steps back to make a porch, which you can see a little bit there. And so the end on the street is actually just about 11 feet wide. So when you kind of come up around the corner, it's very narrow. There's lots of height in there. We have windows on one side high up that are operable, windows on the opposite side low down, so you can get cross ventilation and stack ventilation. We did a lot with trellises and wisteria to increase shading. That's a carport there.
Is that next to the UPA right behind?
Yeah, it is. And then this is the inside. So this is 16 feet wide, double height space. This is the outside on the back side where the bedrooms are and the trellis. So this was the, you can see, single family house. This is us down here. It's the only one that has been certified. This was back in 2010. They got a lot of press for that. There's only, at this point, in 2010, there is only 10 projects that have been certified. And the humidity, I did a whole study on this, track data logging the temperature, humidity, as well as the energy consumption. And we kind of backed out a lot of really particular information about how difficult it is to design down here because of the humidity issue. So this is the only kind of data point, but this kind of puts passive house as the strategy. And if you follow those 5 points I just made, that can get you almost all the way to passive house, which is, they claim 90% reduction. In our climate, maybe 70% reduction. But typical house now, if that's up here, on this chart, a new house built to code is 100. So that way any reduction from new codes is a direct percentage reduction. So an Energy Star home, I think, is 86. And so that comes right in there. And then the Architecture 2030, which is an ambitious goal, a goal for energy savings, puts it down to 50% of current code-built houses. And passive house tries to get it down there. And then a net zero house would literally be at 0. So ambitious goals, I think, are doable. So a quick look at the LeBois house. We did balloon framing to reduce, so there's no, in between the first floor and the second floor, this is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. In between the first floor and the second floor, there's no collection of wood because the studs go all the way up, and we hang the second floor on the inside. We wrapped the whole house in polyiso-sanuated insulation so that any thermal breaks that we had even after the advanced framing got reduced to almost nothing because there was a wrap of insulation around it. And on the roof plane, we had 2 plies. And then the inside, we had spray foam insulation. So it was a tight, well-sealed envelope. And we used not quite triple pane windows, but double pane with a film inside of it. So we kind of followed these categories. This is a quick look at that idea of advanced framing. So standard framing, which uses 16-inch on center, 2x4s filled with insulation, has this much insulation, 65%, this much lumber, 25%, and then the voids, particularly the corners at the soffits, where you just can't get anything in there to insulate with, is 10%. And when you do the optimum value engineering or advanced framing, you cut the lumber down dramatically and increase the insulation dramatically. So you save a little bit on lumber, and you get a lot better R value in your walls, and you have thicker walls. So it's when you make a decision to build, it's a basic decision that you can make, and there's lots of savings inside there. We also did what we call a back-vented rain screen. So this is just a simplified section of that house. And then this is the wall assembly. And then you can see the siding right here is offset on sleepers. And that leaves a ventilable cavity. So it's hardy panel on the outside, and then there's an airspace behind it, and it's open on the bottom and open on the top. Traditionally, it's called a back-vented rain screen, and the idea is that no matter how much you caulk your siding, it's always going to break down at some point. It's going to be a maintenance issue, and it's potentially a water issue. When you have a back-vented rain screen, it allows ventilation in there. And the idea is that water's not a problem, unventilated water's a problem. So water's always going to get in, so this is the strategy to let that out. In our climate, though, it has a dramatic second benefit, and that is it acts as a whole house shading device. The 2 passive strategies we have are shading and ventilation. And so when you wrap a whole house with a small airspace, you're shading the entire house. The sun hits it. Whatever heat travels through there before it gets to the insulation vents out. And there's a cavity, hot air rises and goes right out the top. And so it's really an advantageous thing. A very informal way, but an infrared thermometer, when we were building this house, I took a temperature about 140 degrees on the south side in July, and just sticking up inside, it was 20 degrees cooler on the outside of the insulation because of that whole house shading device. So it costs a little bit more. You need sleepers on the side, and then put your siding up. It works great. And then, this is the mechanical system for that, but when you get small, we put a 1.5-ton mini split in there, and that's really the only air conditioning and heating. And when we did the energy analysis, 1 ton would have been enough. And this is really, it's an 800 square foot footprint. It's double height, so only half of it's a double height space, half of it's the bedrooms. So you end up with 1,600 square feet, and this actually has a basement. It's an above ground basement. So it's a house on slab, but we raise everything up 4 feet, where a lot of the ducts and everything runs underneath there, but it's part of the conditioned envelope. So it's the equivalent to a 2,000 square foot house. And then we ran it with, we have a 1.5-ton mini split in there. We have what you call an energy recovery ventilation system. So that manages the fresh air. But what it does is once you cool, and this is a big deal, once you cool and air condition the inside of the house, if you want to get fresh air so you don't have sick building syndrome, you got to get fresh air from outside in. And then that means you have to take all the stuff that you cooled and dehumidified and dump it outside. So you're constantly taking hot humid air from outside and putting cold dehumidified air from inside and switching them. So that machine, which just runs on a 110 plug, actually recovers a lot of that energy, the dehumidification and the cooling inside there. So you can run this, and a lot of times we don't have to run the mini split, and not in the dead of summer, but in the shoulder seasons, the fall and the spring, and that will actually maintain the inside condition for a long period. And this is actually an aftermarket element that was talked about today. This goes on top of a water heater, and this one's made in Houston, but it's an air-to-water heat pump, which you can now buy on water heaters. But we have a water heater. We put this right on top. It sticks into it. we pull out our 220, which is a huge energy consumer, and we plug in, this is a 110, and so it takes it's just like it's like a window unit. So when you have a window unit, it takes the ambient air, and it splits it in the hot and cold. It dumps the hot out its back, outside, and it dumps the cold inside, and so you get air conditioning. This does the same thing. Whatever we have inside the house, this takes that air, splits it in the hot and cold, gives us an extra 7,000 BTUs of cooling and dehumidification, and dumps the hot in the water heater so we don't have to use 220. So 110 plug, we get 7,000 BTUs of cooling and air conditioning plus hot water, which is amazing, right? The downside is you can only use it when you have a place to dump that hot, right? So if your hot water tank is full up with heat, you can't dump it, it won't run. So it's an auxiliary thing, it's not a main thing. So you have to be careful how you use it. So that's it. I'm not going to talk about this in detail, but we tracked it, we data logged this, total energy consumption, the mini split, net energy, the PV generation. We have thin film solar on top, a very small array, a little bit under 3 kilowatt hour solar array. And then we tracked it in very detailed amounts. We used a TED system, we charted it, and then we laid it out in a psychometric chart, which puts a comfort zone, and we're able to really carefully watch through different times of day how it goes. So we did an 18-month study of this and tracked it really carefully. Almost time? All right. All right. So this, I'm going to skip right over. This is the Google Power Meter, and we can track it. All right. 2 minutes? 2 minutes?
Go for it.
2 minutes.
Yeah,
All right.
2 minutes.
The Dupuy House, built on those same strategies. This was built last year. Some basic principles: north, south, east, west orientation. So you always want your long axis when you build, east and west, and then the short direction, north and south, so that way you get a broad south side, which is easy to manage, you can shade. And then you get a big opening on the north side where you can have lots of windows because there's no direct sun, and you minimize the east and west. Because if you've ever driven back and forth between here and Baton Rouge, if you go to Baton Rouge in the morning, the sun's right in your eye, and you turn down your shade, it's the most difficult way to manage. You can't block it, right? So you drive it. And when you drive home at sunset, same thing, it's kind of coming in there. So you don't want any windows on your east and west side, and you can avoid it. You want to maximize on the north and the south. So shading and ventilation, this is the idea of it being well insulated, managing the overhang so that you can get the sun that you want and block out the sun that you don't. And so we basically made a house within a house. So there's like a whole shading device inside there, and then we open up to the north side. I mean, this might be a little too detailed for this, but it's really important to track where you put your windows. It makes a lot more sense to have a real focused area where you have a robust amount of glazing so that you can get a real connection to the outside. But on the east and west, which I'm not showing here, have almost no windows if you do it. All right, we'll wrap there.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure some of you will want to hang around for questions. And thank you very much, Melinda Taylor and Professor Corey Sappett. And thank you, guests.
I was wondering, I'm very unsophisticated with what you're talking about. The dehumidification, though, is very real to me, having grown up here. And I just had this observation as an aging person recently, when the winters that we've had, and the house that I live in, it seems like the winters the humidity is very impactful in the winter here to me in my house, and it possibly even more so with our system that we have than in the summer. It just is much more uncomfortable. And I just wondered if it's the same principles for dehumidification.
They're similar. So, I mean, the issue is that your air conditioner manages humidity. And so in the summertime, you run your air conditioner to get cool, but in the wintertime, you don't. So there's no machine doing anything about it. So if you got some kind of standalone dehumidifier, that could help manage that.
The library unfortunately is asking us to constrict our time a little bit, so I'm going to ask to go ahead and make our concluding remarks for the league. And thank you, maybe you can gather in the halls. And really appreciate your information.
Thank you so much for coming out. We want to thank our co-sponsors again, the Lafayette Utility System, Lafayette Consolidated Government Plan, Lafayette, and of course the Lafayette Public Library for accommodating us here today. Thank the league. Anyone would like to join, we have applications out in the front. We can always use extra volunteers, extra hands. We think we're doing a great thing in the community, and we can use as much help as possible. Thank you all again for coming.
The preceding program was made possible in part with production assistance provided by AOC Community Media.